right, so thank you again for joining us for today's Strategies for Surviving the Thesis or Dissertation Process from Recent Graduates workshop. We have a panel today joining us, Dr. George William Kajumba, Dr. Shamai Abdul Halim, Dr. Dustin Davis, and Dr. Nadia Eldemir Dash. Please correct me if that's incorrect. As recent graduates, they'll be offering us advice and answers and answering questions regarding the thesis dissertation writing process. So before I dive into questions for the panel, I'd like to turn it over to them to provide a little bit more of a robust introduction. Let's start with Dr. Kajumba.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Just lost your video. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is George William Kajumba. Most people call me Kajumba, and those are like the close friends. They call me Kajumba because George Williams, there's so many George Williams. So I always tell people, yeah, I'm Kajumba, so that I differentiate myself. I graduated from UNLV in 2021 spring, and I started working at Southern Nevada Water Authority as a postdoc. So that's where I am right now. Anything that I've missed?
I think you're on mute, Alyssa.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kajumba. I think that's great for now. We'll certainly have lots of questions for you.
Okay.
Next on my screen square list, we have Dr. Dustin Davis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dustin. I graduated from UNLV in a PhD program called Interdisciplinary Health Sciences in May of 2023, so just a few months ago. And I started as a postdoc at UNLV, so same university here, on July 1st. And after this, my goal is to pretty soon, actually in a few months, start applying for professorships at different universities to get started on that route. So that's who I am in a nutshell, and I look forward to talking to the other panelists and to offer anything I can to you all who are attending.
Thank you. Dr. Shaima Abdul Halim.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shaima Abdul Halim. I'm from Egypt. I got my master's and PhD at UNLV, so I'm here to share my experience with writing a thesis and a dissertation. I'm currently an assistant professor of geology at Cairo University in Egypt, and I'm happy to be with you till the end of the workshop.
Thank you so much. And then lastly, I'll turn it over to Dr. Nadia Eldemir Dash.
Hi, everybody. I just actually got my my PhD in the Department of Political Science over the summer. So I defended in June, and this week will be my last official week as a student. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences, my very recent, very fresh experiences of writing the dissertation. I'm going to be starting a postdoc here as well in the fall semester, so I'm preparing for that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I know we're excited to hear about your experiences. So to kick us off, the first question we have is, what did you most struggle with while writing the thesis or dissertation? If you wrote both, perhaps talk about how the struggles were similar or different. And whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think during my graduate school, one of the major things that I faced was the motivation, maintaining the self-motivation. It's when you just jumped into high school, you have just got your admission, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited, I'm going to be doing this kind of work. But down the road, you find that first year, second year, third year, by the time you reach your third year, the motivation you had to do the things, you find that it's almost decreasing. And that's where most people lose it at all. And that's where even myself, I felt like I was going to lose it at all, because the motivation I had in my first year was almost, draining to zero. And I was like, oh my goodness. So it was a huge challenge of maintaining my motivation. Anyone else can add on?
I mean, I would echo that. Really, it is probably the most challenging bit is to maintain your momentum and stay on track. And so I think it's really important to have a schedule and have people who will kind of keep you accountable and hold you to that schedule, because it's very easy. It's a very long project, and you become extremely familiar with it. You repeat a lot of things, and so you do kind of start to lose interest a little bit. And if you're, for example, a research assistant, or you're a graduate, you're teaching or something like that, it's easy to get distracted by, new projects, new classes, new students and all of that. So yeah, maintaining motivation and maintaining the momentum can be really challenging.
That definitely makes sense. Oh, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, thank you. I think that Kajumba and also Nadia are on to what I felt as well. When I was completing my PhD program, just the enormity of the dissertation was overwhelming. I mean, I feel like a lot of times I didn't know what to work on because there were so many parts that I would often just keep procrastinating and put off doing anything because I was feeling that analysis paralysis, just the inability to choose something and work on it. And what I found was most effective by the time I really felt like I was getting into a groove was just committing to a given amount of time daily. I think the hardest part was starting. So I would tell myself, okay, I'm just going to work on something for 5 to 10 minutes. Just pick something that's part of the dissertation, whether that's formatting the pages or just trying to jot down a paragraph. And most of the time when I would just get started, I would find a groove and then be able to go for more than just those 5 or 10 minutes. Now, that was not the biggest challenge for me during my master's program. So between 2017 and 2019, I did a master's program where I wrote a thesis. And my biggest struggle there was that I was, as a teaching assistant, working mostly out of my office. I was fortunate to have an office in a master's program, but it was in a public space where a lot of students went by and a lot of my colleagues were around. And I found it hard to carve out time to really write because I'm someone who needs silence to really focus when I'm trying to think critically and write. And so what I found was I would need to go elsewhere from that very high traffic location to focus. So I kind of brought that into my PhD program and worked often from my apartment or in a coffee shop or somewhere where people weren't going to stop and talk to me.
Thank you. Shaima, did you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I can kind of echo them, everybody. I think my first struggle about writing a thesis as a master's student was, so writing a thesis was my first writing experience ever because I received my education in Egypt and they don't focus on writing. So writing a thesis in the US in a different language was my first writing in English experience, my first writing experience like ever. I mean, I spoke English very well. I knew my work, I knew my interpretation, I knew what I want to say and what I want to do, but I had a hard time getting my thoughts on paper. Like, this is my work, this is what I have done, nobody did it. I mean, I knew everything about it, but I couldn't put it on paper. I remember my advisor was like, you need to start writing. And I spent like 3 weeks after that struggling to write only one sentence. Like I couldn't write a sentence. And then it took me like 9 months to write a thesis after that. When I got to my PhD, I had a totally different struggle. I used to write too much that my writing wouldn't get published. And I might say, good for her, she can write, but you can't publish a 40-page paper. You have to take it down to 10 pages at least. So that was my struggle. And they're both bad. I mean, writing nothing is bad and writing too much is bad. It took me a lot of time. It took me years to learn how to write. Yeah, these were my biggest 2 struggles in my writing journey.
All right, thank you all so much for sharing. So boot campers out there, you are not alone if you're facing struggles with writing these massive papers. Next question for the panel. What did you learn from the process? And is there anything else you would like to share about the process?
Well, I think I can say, kind of echoing or going off of what Dustin was saying, is you do learn a lot about yourself and about the environments that you need in order to be able to function most productively. And so that's actually a really great part of the whole experience, is that you do kind of come out of it with a better sense of what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then what you could then take and translate that in the future, hopefully, to more successful experiences, particularly if you do want to continue into academia and writing papers and that kind of thing.
I'll
Thank
echo.
you.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Alyssa. I'll echo what Nadia just said about learning about ourselves. I think that I learned most about myself is that I was often waiting for the perfect opportunity or the perfect day or the perfect time of day to write. I mean, I think that I just struggled to really sit down and do the work. And I think that that was an emotional barrier for me. I think that I was feeling insecure a lot about my writing. And so I would kind of push it off. I do believe that my procrastination stems from me having emotional struggles around whatever I'm doing. So if I'm worried what I'm going to write is not good enough, or that the conditions aren't just perfect, then I'll put it off. And by the time I was finishing, I was realizing that there's really never a perfect time. It's about consistency and quantity over time that gives me quality. So I think that I would encourage anyone that's in this workshop who might struggle to just sit down and get started to do so, because it's easier to work with something you have on a page than to work with a blank page.
Yeah, so if I'm to jump in, thank you for those contributions. One of the major things that I learned throughout my PhD, writing all this, one major thing I learned was perseverance. Because remember, you are lacking this kind of motivation. You are like, every time you try to write something, it's not coming out. So it taught me that kind of perseverance that even I have carried to my workplace. Because where you work from, you find that sometimes you are facing so many challenges, and then you are like, what should I do? Should I quit? Should I continue? So I think I got most of those kind of things through my PhD. By maintaining my motivation, I was able to build my perseverance. And then number two, I was able to learn how to communicate complex issues. Most of us, we are doing research that is maybe very complicated, and sometimes even it's very hard to communicate. And that's why even sometimes we find it very hard to write. But having learned and having gone through my dissertation, I learned how to communicate these complex ideas in a simple term, that whereby each and every person who is reading maybe my work can actually pick an idea and they're able to implement it. So if I'm to summarize my points, basically two things I learned during my dissertation is perseverance and learn how to communicate complex issues.
For me, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that it's a learning journey, because I used to think that everybody's expecting me to get it right the first time. Everybody's expecting me to know how to write. But then, I was expecting myself to know how to write when I've never learned that before. So I think the biggest lesson was to learn that it's a learning journey. You're not going to get it right the first time. You have to learn, you have to ask questions. I used not to ask anybody anything because I'm so afraid that they will know that I don't know how to write. So yeah, I learned that I need to ask questions. I need to seek help from my peers, my advisors, my family, my friends, from everybody around me. Yep, that's it. That's my biggest lesson.
Well, thank you all for sharing what you learned. So now that you've been through it, looking back on the writing process and knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I think if I'm to jump in first here, I think what I could have done differently is having effective organization and regular communicating to maybe my supervisor. You find that most of the things I was kind of like losing, that kind of motivation. Basically, maybe sometimes, most of the times I wasn't well organized. You find that I'm jumping here and there. I'm trying to tackle this challenge. I'm trying to bring in these ideas, but you find that they are almost crashing with each other. And then at the end of the day, you find that you are losing that kind of focus. And I wish one of the major things that I could have learned is like effective organization, organizing my work, knowing that, okay, this I'm going to write this structure. I'm going to structure it like this and this and this. I wish I knew that from the start. I think it could have helped me a lot.
I think kind of sort of similar to staying organized. I think the one thing that I would do is, you start the day and you have your to-do list for that day and you're going to do X, Y, and Z things. I think what I would do is then have a list of things that had already been done, because what sometimes will happen is you're jumping between sections of the dissertation. Maybe you're doing the data analysis and then you write a bit of the methodology and then you go back and you fill in something else. And so if you're not going in sort of linear order of the chapters of the dissertation or the sections, it's easy to forget with time that certain things have already been done, or that you did things in a certain way the first time, and so you need to replicate it that same way the next time. And so I would keep a list of everything that has already been done so I don't end up duplicating work, because that did happen to me a couple of times. I'd be writing something and I think, sounds really familiar. I feel like I've already done this. But then by the time I figured it out and dug up the original, document and stuff like that, you've wasted all of this time, and it can be very frustrating. So I would keep track of not only what I want to do, but also what's already been done.
I would say, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have worried about it too much. I wouldn't have worried about getting my thesis or dissertation written. It takes years, but it's going to get done. I mean, I would have enjoyed the journey instead, because when we are students, it's when we learn. You're not supposed to know how to get the writing perfect the first time. You're allowed to make mistakes. Everybody knows that you're allowed to make mistakes. Sometimes we don't know, so we keep judging ourselves too much. Sometimes we're too excited to become the perfect researchers. Like the first year we start our PhD, I want to publish 100 papers in this PhD. We want to get it right the first time, and this puts too much pressure on us to get done with the degree or with the dissertation too fast. So you start to get disorganized. You start forgetting things as they were saying. I mean, I would just relax and enjoy the learning process.
I think all the advice the other panelists have given has been great, and I would agree with everything they said. For me, I think what I would have done earlier is started focusing on input goals instead of output goals. So I started out I want output goals. I want this many paragraphs a day, or I want to get this section done. And that kind of relates back to what I said not too long ago about feeling overwhelmed with I would feel like I failed if I didn't get this outcome done on the schedule that I had set. But sometimes when I would set deadlines for myself, I would not really fully appreciate or understand how much work was going to go into a certain part of the dissertation. So I would inevitably not reach that output goal. And about halfway through, I was like, okay, I had watched this video and this author was talking about input goals. He said that he would write for this much time a day. He would start a stopwatch. If he'd get up from his computer, he would stop the stopwatch. And then when he would sit back down, he would start it. And so I set an input goal for a given number of hours a day that I was going to try to write. And I put that right up front in the morning when I knew I was most productive. And it helped carry me for about 6 months of writing toward finishing my dissertation. And so switching to focusing on what I was putting in, not necessarily what was coming out, helped me not keep thinking about these kind of abstract goals way in the future of having this part done or that or the whole dissertation, and instead focus on my daily, from day-to-day effort.
Thank you all so much. So we have a question in the chat here. Let's jump to that. Can you share tips on how you organized your research for the lit review that you, such as academic articles, websites, etc., that you had read and want to add into different parts of your work?
Can I jump in here?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the great tools that I discovered during my process, how you can organize your literature review, how you can organize the papers that you have read, is using one of the tool called Mendeley. And I know UNLV subscribes to Mendeley, which gives you about 100 GB that you can, store all your papers in a well-organized manner. And this way you are able to create different folders. And the moment you need to cite that paper, you just pull it out and then put it in your work. So you don't need to be looking in a different folder. So using such kind of tools that are available at the university, I think was one of the great things that helped me to manage my work effectively. Yep.
I used Mendeley as well, but they recently had a weird update that made it so they wouldn't, I don't know, there's something happened with the update that wouldn't let me link it into Word anymore. So I use something very similar called Zotero, which does essentially the same thing as Mendeley, and it lets you make folders and search and link into your Word document. And I would agree, yeah, that's extremely helpful. I would try and keep your actual PDFs, if you have your own folders on your laptop, try and keep them distinct as possible and try to label them as as much as much detail as you want. But also thinking of what are the things that you remember. So for some people, I remember the names of the authors very well, but for others, I'm not familiar as much with the author, and so I only remember the topic. And so just kind of figure out the way how you best recollect a paper or what it was about, and use that as kind of a labeling system. And once you incorporate that labeling process into your output, or not output, your workflow system, then hopefully things should run a little bit smoothly. But it's because it's very easy to just sort of download PDFs sort of in a lot in a row without really thinking about where they're going. So even if you do that, maybe at the end of the week or something, kind of go through your laptop and try and keep it organized and neat.
For me, I used my Kindle, my Amazon Kindle. I read my papers on my Kindle because whenever you highlight, and Kindle collects all the points that you highlighted and puts them in one folder, and then you can go back to the points and the ideas that you have read. Click on it, and then it takes you back to the paper, where you saw these ideas. So it was very helpful in just keeping track of the ideas that I have read in the literature that I want to use later in my writing. That was very useful.
I would say that my method was very similar to what Shaima and Nadia recommended, and I would find parts of manuscripts or websites that I thought at the time of reading it that I'd want to cite at some point, and then I would copy and paste what they said, knowing I was not going to just copy and paste it in my dissertation, but figure out what it was, where it was in the paper, what was the author and the title, and then I could then summarize or paraphrase when I went to write, but then I wouldn't lose that snippet that I really wanted at the time of reading it. And as you might know, if you're already working on a thesis or dissertation, there are tens, hundreds, potentially thousands of different sources you'll look at as you build. So when you have something in your mind at the moment, try to anchor it somehow on something, whether it's a note card or a notebook or an app like Apple Notes or Google Drive or whatever you would like. And then as for citing papers, I also use Zotero. It just worked well for me. I went to one of the UNLV libraries workshops that compared Mendeley, Zotero, and there was another one, I can't, I think it was like RefWorks, and I ended up choosing Zotero. But one thing I recommend for organizing your research is kind of like Nadia was saying, I would really recommend keeping up with it on a weekly basis, if not more frequently, because if you get to the end of your dissertation, you have hundreds of sources you got to then format properly. It can be overwhelming. You know, sometimes when you auto import paper from a website, like a journal's website, into Zotero or Mendeley, it doesn't pull everything you need. And so you might have to alter the way the information came into the program. And if you do that as you go along, it can be easier. And my last recommendation is do that when you feel unmotivated to actually write. I mean, it's still something contributing to your dissertation or thesis. So if you don't feel like doing anything else, just work on something as easy as pulling together your references.
Thank you all. Those are great tips. So let's pull another question from the chat from Cecilia, and this is a multi-part question. So did you continue writing and publishing after graduating? What changed? Did you feel the writing was easier?
So I have been working on some research projects, both with professors that I had been RAs for in the past, and I'm also working on an individual paper that derives from my dissertation. I've been working on it for quite some time, and they're all kind of in the publishing process. So far, I have been able to continue writing and moving towards publication. I don't know that I would say the writing is easier. It's a different kind of stakes. You just don't feel that it's such high stakes compared to your dissertation. I think kind of Shema and Dustin have kind of talked about like the sense of feeling overwhelmed and this pressure, and it's very intense and stuff. And that's definitely, fortunately, has the feeling that has largely subsided. Since the dissertation, since I've completed it. So in that sense, yes, it is easier.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you're going to be working in academia, you're going to be writing forever. If not, you will not get to write again, hopefully. But I mean, the writing gets fun afterwards. I mean, it's easier. You know how to do it. You know how to get organized. You know how to find what you're looking for a lot faster than being a student. So it gets easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm to say, did you continue writing and publishing after graduating, and what changed? So if I'm to answer that, I did both. However, it is very easy to publish when you're still a graduate student. For example, I graduated from the College of Engineering, and one of the requirements was before you graduate, you need at least 2 publications. So it also depends on the college where you come from. So during that period, I made sure that at least I have 2 publications, and that one helped me a lot. However, when I graduated, I've tried to publish, but ever since I graduated 1.5 years ago, trust me, I've only published 1 paper. So my productivity when it comes to publishing, it has totally decreased, because right now you're dealing with so many other things. You're no longer dealing with only academic things. You have family, you have the work to do, you have projects, you have people to communicate or your results. So basically the time you focus on, towards publication goes down. When you're still in school, you have like almost 95% of the time to write and publish. And do you feel writing was easier? I think in all the process of idea generation, conducting experiments, collecting data, and writing is the hardest part, because you only realize that you have made a mistake when you start writing. And then you're like, oh, what I have doesn't make sense. Then I have to go back. And then you feel like you are stuck, like the way Shaima said. So literally, writing is the hardest part, but you can manage. That's it.
I would say it's true. Writing is hard for me. I mean, it's hard to communicate in a clear, accessible, and also informational or informative way when there's so much information in our own fields that we have to pull together and try to create something new from. So I do find it hard to write, and I don't think it's easier since graduating. I do feel the pressure of working towards graduation has fallen off. And I will say that it's not as great, but there is still the pressure I feel to write and publish, because that's part of my postdoc contract. That's the goal. That's now why I'm being paid. And so I know that as part of my job, I need to keep submitting and trying to publish. I think a little bit about that question about am I publishing after graduating? I haven't published a first author paper since graduating, but I've published as a second author on one. And that's another thing. If you graduate, it might be worth still collaborating with people you knew during your program or with your advisor, even if it's not you writing as the first author, because it's a different experience being a second, third, fourth author. And I feel like I've learned a lot being in that role. And so I would recommend staying engaged with the people you knew while you were a student.
All right, thank you all for addressing those questions. For our next question, what are strategies that you think all graduate students should implement to help make the writing process smoother?
I mean, I think for me personally, deadlines for,
I could jump in this question.
Sorry. I think somebody.
Go ahead and continue, Nadia. I think Shaima just had a little delay on her audio.
Oh, okay. Deadlines for like different parts of the dissertation with somebody who will keep you accountable, even if it's like somewhat outside of academia, but somebody who will, you know, check in with you on a certain day and be like, hey, you were supposed to finish X. Did you finish it? Even because then at least you are accomplishing something. In my experience, things that aren't due by a certain point just don't get done. They continue to be kind of pushed aside for things that do have some kind of a deadline, whether in your personal life or in other aspects of your work. And so in order to really prioritize your dissertation writing, that's really the biggest challenge of it, is it's purely self-regulated. And so in order to prioritize that, you have to have some kind of accountability mechanism in place, and somebody who will say, you know, by this date, you should have done this. And if not, you know, why not, right? And then that way you are accomplishing something. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be perfect when you kind of submit it to this deadline, but it'll be done, right? So that alone is, you know, 80% of the battle is just, is it finished? Is it completed? And then there will always be time to go back and review and clean things up and all of that.
I'll jump in unless Shaima wants to. I want to give her the opportunity if she's still there. Okay, I'll go ahead and see, and then if Shaima comes on. I agree with Nadia. I think that making sure that you keep yourself on schedule is helpful. So maybe find with your advisor, or if you have a writing group, times at which you would like to be finished with certain stages, and then work backward to see how much you need to be working on parts of your dissertation to meet those deadlines. And one of the ways in which I think is effective for me, and I'm not sure if it would be for you, but to get yourself towards those, is I'm a firm believer in scheduling a lot of things in my calendar, even things that don't involve anybody but myself and my computer. So I would schedule my writing time on my calendar and sit down at those times as best I could and write, so that I knew during, like, how much time I'd be writing during the week, and also it was kind of a motivator for me to see it on my calendar and know, okay, I've committed to myself. And if I commit to other people to calendar events, I should commit to myself and write during those times. From a practical standpoint, besides scheduling the time, setting deadlines, please be as safe as you can and make sure you're saving multiple versions of your work. I would save every time I saved, I would save save a new file and just put the date after it. And I'd have like a folder with like 100+ files of different versions, because I think it was somebody, I think it was Nadia saying, how do I know if I wrote that piece or if you deleted something? Did you already write it? Just if you have the old versions, you can go back and look at it. And then don't just have one hard drive, put it on Google Drive, put it on iCloud, put it on an external hard drive. Do not lose your hard-earned work. Okay, that is critical.
Thank you very much, Dustin, about that. Yeah, really, you need to have multiple versions of your work saved and different folders. But one thing, if I'm to summarize that, is like always set clear goals. One of the things that the strategy that helped me to go through having known that I'm losing perseverance is to set clear goals. Just give yourself a know, okay, this is my work. I'm dividing it into these different sections, and I'm going to finish goal number 1 within this time frame. I'm going to finish goal number 2 within this time frame, because you cannot set time if you don't have clear goals. So first have your clear goals and then set the timeline. And then also take breaks. When we are inside there in school, you are like, oh, I'm just reading, things are so hard. But trust me, when you take time off, go for hiking, go for camping, you come back when the mind is fresh, and then you have a fresh start. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of piggyback off of that, as graduate students, we're used to working every day. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I worked weekends, I worked weekdays. Like, there was always something to do. There was always something to read. There was always an assignment to write. There was always something. But once you get into the dissertation phase and you're not taking classes anymore, and if you're not teaching or you're not doing any graduate assistant work, you have all of this time. But the instinct is to fill all of it with work, and to feel like if you're not working every single day the way you were when you were in classes, then you must not be working enough. But this was just, for me, a recipe for just total burnout. Take the weekend off, take the weekend off, relax, go hiking, like Kajumbo was saying, or do something else, and then come back on Monday refreshed, and able to focus. And don't feel bad about it. Don't feel guilty. You deserve some time off as well.
Thank you all so much. Shaima, I'm not sure, were you able to join us again?
Oh yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. My phone's battery is about to die, so I have to switch to my laptop.
Oh, not to worry.
Yeah, I think all the good advices have been said. I can't emphasize enough making a schedule. I mean, mark down at least 1 hour a day on your schedule, that you get away from all the distractions and write. Just relax, get a cup of coffee, don't talk to anybody, just sit down and write anything. And you can just start writing. And then this 1 hour, you're going to get it increased day by day. So today I start with 1 hour, and tomorrow you'll find yourself, oh, I feel like I can write for a little bit more today. So tomorrow it's going to be 2 hours. 2 days from now it's going to be 3 hours, and so on. I used to write for like 9 hours straight by the end of my program. So yeah, you don't have to worry about allocating like 4 hours a day to write every day from the beginning. This is not going to happen. Just relax and start writing. Yep.
Thank you. So earlier on, some different software resources were mentioned. Are there any other resources that you used or wish that you had used in helping with your writing process?
I would say the writing bootcamp. It's a must. I used to have friends who would join like every time. I only joined one time, and I wish I could have joined like every time. I only joined one time, like by the end of my program or something. It really provided me the right atmosphere, support that I really needed to start writing. Yeah, just join a writing bootcamp. It will get you started.
I would agree. I think the writing bootcamp was great from the program offering. I mean, that was what helped me get to my first publication at UNLV, and it was my first time writing as a first author, and I was able to get a huge jump on that paper because the bootcamp was a week to just start working on it, where I didn't have anything else and I had committed to that. It was just kind of astonishing how much else fell away and I could focus on it when I had the conditions set up like the bootcamp offers. From a software perspective, I think I would have earlier on, I think I would have liked to probably I had used this program called Roam for a while, and I'm not at all affiliated with it, but Roam Research is a software where you can link different ideas and it kind of creates this network of ideas. So if you were writing about a topic, you could continuously like link to that topic so you could see all of that information you've been writing on that one topic in one place in the program. I used that program when I was starting my dissertation writing in earnest, and it was really good for organizing my thoughts, but I didn't use it towards the very end when I started revising and formatting. Another one I might recommend, not a particular software, but maybe some kind of digital software that reminds you to take breaks, because as others on the panel have been saying, use breaks to recover. One, it's just helpful for regaining mental focus, but two, like prolonged sitting, me being focusing on exercise and health in my program, like I'm guilty of sitting for way too long at once. So I actually got this little program that like I can choose how long I want it to before it alerts me. And I set it for every 30 minutes and then I make myself get up. So it's kind of like the Pomodoro technique where you work for 25 minutes or so and then take a 5-minute break. I really liked that for helping me stay, like have bursts of focus, take a break, bursts of focus, take a break. But if you work better in longer bouts, like Shaima was saying that she was working for 9 hours at a time, that's also okay. It's just your personal preference.
I think personally, one of the services that UNLV provide was the Writing Center. The Writing Center is open Monday to Monday. I don't know the operating hours, but these are the people who can help you to guide in your writing. You find that, like the way Shaima was saying, she was saying that, you know, sometimes you find that you cannot write very well. So these people, they can help you edit and also, you know, make your sentence construction very clear so that by the time you start communicating your work, everyone can understand it. Having said that, right now we are having so many softwares coming up due to the AI development. You find that these days writing sentences that don't make sense is almost impossible. So having drafted something, maybe put it in the AI software and then tell it, like, you know, to guide you if there are any language mistakes, make it clear, and if there's anything it can do, it will guide you very well. And then another software, I think it is Grammarly, but I think the best version is the one for payment. The free version may not be so good. So those 3 things: use the Writing Center at UNLV, use Grammarly, and also the AI systems.
I will say, to add on about the Writing Center, if you don't want to go in, you can submit 5 pages at a time to the online writing lab. I think there's a maximum number of times you can submit per week. But when I was in kind of the editing phase, I would submit certain parts of my chapters in kind of 5-page chunks to the online writing lab, and I got some really good feedback from them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all. Those are so helpful to learn about these resources. I'm going to pull another question from the chat from Catherine. And she asked, did anyone have experience being a part-time student and having to balance life, job, and writing your thesis?
Can I go? So you find that most of us at graduate level, we are working, and at the same time, we have to, we have to, study. Really, sometimes you find that it is very hard to balance. Your boss wants you to deliver specific results. However, you have homework, you have something to write. What I can tell you, anyone who is like a student at the same time is working, is going to put a toll on yourself. So really you need to put in 2 times the amount of time a normal student is putting in. As some students are going to bed by around 8, 9 p.m., so you have to stay awake to try and accomplish something, because maybe during the time you spend 6 hours at work. And now after that, now it's the time, to divert those hours towards your academics. So really what I can say, it is very hard to balance those 3 things: the work, academics, and then family, most especially if you have family. Some of us who went through academics, we were working, but we never had family, which helped us. But if you have those 3, I don't think I'm the best person to advise you. It will be very hard, because if you're going to start working on your, maybe let's say on your dissertation, you're going to be writing in the evening. That's when your children are back home. So how are we going to balance that? So really it will be very tough.
So I can share something. This is not my personal experience, but I had read about a woman who, while she was writing her dissertation, developed some kind of problem with her hand where she could only type for 15 minutes, like at a time. And then she would need a break. I think she had some sort of like carpal tunnel type of situation in her hands. And I was reading because I was interested in like being productive and, time management and stuff like that. And so she was basically like, she had to really, maximize those 15 minutes. There was no time to waste. Because if she was going to use those 15 minutes, she had to be really, really intentional about it. And so I think, pulling from what Kajumba was saying, you have a very limited window of time, as he's describing, to get stuff done. And I think it's probably the best way to do it is to kind of do what she did, which is go in with a very specific list of goals and, be prepared, like have everything set up. The papers you want to cite are in front of you, the data that you're using, it's there, like everything is ready to go, so that if you've only got 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, but that is like really productive and it's being used directly towards your dissertation, because it is really, really challenging. There's really, not a lot of flexibility in terms of using your time. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that helps. Sharing that. I wish I could remember the name of the article. It was very interesting, but I do not, unfortunately.
Okay, I see that Hamed has raised his hand. Would you like to unmute and ask a question, Hamed?
Yes, thank you. So my question is for Dr. Kajumba. Using Grammarly, it's basically an ethical question for me. So if we rephrase what we write by Grammarly, would it be like using AI in our benefit, or is it okay to use it in that way? Because right now with the ChatGPT and Bard and all the AIs, it's really, I don't know, is it ethical to use it or not? Basically, that's my question.
It's very interesting. I had a talk at the University of South Africa, and one of the things that came up about AI was like, is it ethical someone to get an article, for example, like the introduction, you paste it in ChatGPT, for example. There are so many other versions, and you just tell it, can you rewrite this one to avoid plagiarism? It's going to give you one of the perfect rewritten document that not even like your advisor can find anywhere. So one of the core principles of academics is integrity. So if you don't have that core pillar in you as an individual, I don't think you deserve to be into graduate school. Because if you can't uphold the integrity and say, this is my work that I own, then I don't think you deserve to come to the table of thinkers. Because at graduate level, we are training thinkers, people who are going to sit there and think the solution for different problems. So I'll say it's not ethical, but people are going to use it. Are you among those people who are going to be using those softwares to rewrite maybe the introduction, to rewrite the results of other people? It's wrong. That's what I can say. Yeah. But always just remember the core principle of graduate school is integrity. If you lack that, it's going to be tough on your side.
I think that I've been reading a lot about this as well, because it's a big issue in academia right now. And as Kajumba has pointed out, the issue of integrity is critical, right? I personally have never used Grammarly, so I'm not totally familiar with it, but my understanding was that it really just kind of corrects grammatical mistakes and makes, suggestions on word choice, which is kind of similar to what you would get if you went to the Writing Center, for example, and you worked with a person, but we wouldn't consider that to be unethical. And so I think Grammarly is probably, from what my understanding, and, if anyone, knows differently, please correct me, but my understanding is that Grammarly is quite different than, an AR software where it could rewrite essentially an entire paragraph or paper for you, where you could, give it some information and some data and ask it to write up a paper for you, where that would be unethical because you're presenting writing that is not actually your own. And I think, part of the challenge, I think, is at least right now in this time that we're in is there's a certain amount of individual judgment that has to go into play or into effect here, and that's the challenge. But my understanding is that Grammarly is different from AI in the sense that it doesn't rewrite your entire work for you, but rather just make some grammatical and word choice suggestions that are similar to what you might get if you were working with an individual or someone who is editing your paper, for example.
Thank you, Nadia and Kajumba. So this is like a hot topic for debate among my friends and my colleagues. So let's say Grammarly, you can change a word based on the suggestions that Grammarly provides you, right? So basically, it's not your work. It's a word that been suggested to you by an AI. And going back to what Kajumba was talking about, using AI like any type of softwares. So basically, and again, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just arguing if we want to look at on that perspective that Kajumba was saying. So basically, when we go to Writing Center and ask someone to read what we wrote and they like correct our mistakes or a rephrase or things like that, wouldn't it be the same as what AI is doing for us? Because whether you want to do anything with AI or not, ChatGPT bot or whatever, you have to feed the bot. You have to feed the bot to give you results, right? So basically, when we're talking about critical thinking, the critical thinking is the prompt that the student or whoever is using AI is using, right? So that critical thinking is still there. It's just I don't want to use the word mundane, but like it is writing the paragraphs would be something that should be simple for AI or the user to use it, because you can rephrase it. You can change like the structure of the sentence, no matter what, if you're using AI. So by what you and Kajumba are trying to say, by that perspective, wouldn't it be the same using AI and a Writing Center?
No, it's not the same. I actually used to work at the Writing Center here at UNLV. So we were, trained specifically what is acceptable for you to do for a student who is, or not even just a student, but anybody who's coming in to be consulted at the Writing Center, what is acceptable for you to do with their work and what is not acceptable, and what would constitute plagiarism, right? So for me, you're reading someone else's writing, you're saying, hey, this sentence isn't very clear. You're using this word, but I don't think it means what you're trying to say, for example, right? This is, grammatically incorrect. Correct. So you're pointing out the mistakes for the writer for them to be able to identify, and then they can correct those mistakes. They need help correcting the mistake because, there's, varying, levels of English proficiency if you're coming from, a non-English speaking background, for example, or even just, through, age and experience. You get freshman students versus, senior students, right? And so they will inevitably, some people will need assistance to correct that mistake, right? And so you can offer options, right? Or you can offer resources to help them correct that mistake. But what you don't do is you don't say, you shouldn't have used this word, we're going to replace it with this other word, right? You tell the student, this word I don't think you mean is what you think it means, and then you can help them and work with them to select something else that's more appropriate. You tell them, well, what did you actually mean to say here? What are you trying to say? They explain to you what their point is. So then you can debate and work together to come up with something. But ultimately, it's their work. You don't write it for them. You don't do anything for them. You're just helping to guide them through the writing process. So for me personally, I mean, I don't see, these are completely different approaches. And, for me, again, it's the difference between something like Grammarly that will correct grammar and something like AI that will rewrite entire sentences or entire paragraphs. Those are two very different things.
Okay, I'm going to gently interrupt here as we need to wrap up, but thank you so much. I think that's such an important conversation that we are nowhere near concluding, right? So thank you all so much for participating on the panel today. This is really great and insightful for everybody in our boot camp. As we've recorded this session, it is going to be available on the YouTube channel if anybody would like to revisit it later. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we're going to start our next workshop in just a few moments. So thank you all again.